Hello guys, welcome to one more video and thank you so much for watching. In today's video, we are going to talk about false friends. If you have some experience with language learning, if you have some knowledge about linguistics, you probably know what false friends are, and this video is probably not going to teach you anything new. But if you're not as experienced in learning languages and if you don't know that much about linguistics, you're probably wondering what are false friends. And you also probably think that false friends sounds weird when it comes to linguistics. I mean, it's a weird name. Officially, false friends are words in different languages that have similar form, which means similar spelling or similar pronunciation, but completely different meaning. These words are, you can find them in languages that are related, like for example in Slavic languages such as Russian, Serbian, Czech, Polish. There are some words that look and sound the same but have different meaning. The same things also happen with, for example, Spanish and English, even though they don't belong to the same language group. There are still some words that might trick you into thinking that you know their meaning, but actually they mean something completely different, something that you can't even imagine. So in today's video, I want to share few false friends, or quite a few false friends in different languages that I speak that I have learned over the years, and with some of them I have been in very embarrassing situations because I was sure that I know what they mean, but I didn't know. One of the very popular false friends that I'm sure have put many people into an embarrassing situation are words embarrassed in English and embarazada in Spanish. So you logically your brain is trying to find some shortcut to learning Spanish, and you immediately assume that a word that looks similar to the English word you know probably means the same in Spanish. So if you are a native English speaker or if you speak English and if you know what embarrassed means, when you see Spanish word embarazada, you might think that it means exactly the same thing in Spanish. Unfortunately for you, it means something completely different. Embarazada in Spanish means pregnant. So if you want to say that you are embarrassed in Spanish, I don't think you should say that you are embarazada, because you will really get embarrassed, but in a wrong way. So I know that this is one of very popular false friends, and many jokes have been made and many memes have been made about this word. But there are many other words in English and Spanish that sound similar. They're written or spelled in pretty similar way, but they mean something completely different. And this especially applies to the verbs because, as you might know, both English and Spanish have a lot of words and things that they took from Latin. Spanish, of course, more, but English as well. So some of those words might actually have the same root, but now at this point they have completely different meaning. There are many other English-Spanish examples of false friends that might confuse you if you are learning one of these languages. For example, recordar in Spanish doesn't mean to record, it means to remember. Another pretty popular false friend is actualmente, which means currently. It doesn't mean actually. And I have seen quite a few people, Spanish speakers, who when learning English thought that it means the same as in Spanish, but it does not. Another one that comes to my mind now is realizar, which doesn't mean to realize, it means to perform certain action, like to do something. And I'm sure there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of examples of false friends in English and Spanish. So if you are a Spanish speaker learning English or an English speaker learning Spanish, before you learn certain word, check the dictionary. It might mean the same, but it might mean something completely different. I have to admit that I personally have never had a problem with false friends in English and Spanish when I was learning these languages, but I did have a big problem with false friends in Slavic languages. So as you probably know, my native language is Serbian, which is South Slavic language, and I also speak Czech and Russian. which are also Slavic languages, and it definitely helped me having Serbian as my native language to learn Russian and Czech. I think it's a great advantage that I had when learning these languages. But at the same time, I have been confused by false friends many times. The main reason was that when I started learning Czech, I kind of started learning Russian at the same time. Because when I moved to Czech Republic, I was attending a language course for a year. And in my class, most of the students were native Russian speakers from different countries. So our teacher was speaking to us in Czech all the time, so we were not using English at all. We were speaking only in Czech with her, which was a great way to actually learn a language. But I was learning Czech, and then at the same time I was listening a lot to my Russian classmates, and I decided to learn Russian as well. This is something I'm gonna talk about in another video. But I thought that I can learn both of those languages at the same time. And then many times in the classroom when we were learning new words, we have all realized how many same or similar words we have that have completely different meaning in those 2 or 3 languages. So this, for me personally, I never had a problem with false friends in Italian and Spanish, for example, or in Portuguese. Well, maybe a little bit, but not that much. But in Slavic languages, I really have struggled with those false friends, because I have a feeling that when your brain memorizes something and when you learn certain word and its meaning, and if you learn it wrong, it is somehow stuck in your brain, and it's very hard to push your brain to actually change that information into the correct one. There are so many examples of false friends in Slavic languages. I'm just going to list a few guys that have personally confused me a lot, and that I ended up in some embarrassing situations because of them, but it's all fine now. So let's start with Slavic false friends. The funniest false friend in Slavic languages is the word užasan, užasni, and užasni. The first one is in Serbian, the second one is in Czech, and the third one is in Russian. In Russian and in Serbian, these words mean terrible or horrible, like really bad. In Czech, on the other hand, it means great and amazing. And this is something where I was wondering, how did this happen? I mean, how can you have a word that's exactly the same in all 3 languages and it means exact opposite in 2 of them? And it's really funny. So it took me really a long time to actually memorize that in Czech, užasni means great. It means something positive. While in my native language, it's complete opposite. This was something that my brain struggled with for a very long time. Another false friend in Slavic languages that brought a lot of problems to me is the word krasny in Czech, which means beautiful. And in Russian, the same word, krasny, means red, like the color. This is another thing that I have been very confused with, and I have to admit that even now, even though I know the meaning of the word in those 2 languages, my brain is still struggling to actually accept the fact that krasny in Russian means red. For some reason, every time I read something in Russian or every time I listen to a conversation in Russian, my brain is going like, beautiful, oh no, it's actually red. So this is something, and this is a word that I learned the meaning of it in Russian in the very beginning, but because of my experience with Czech, I somehow memorized krasny as beautiful and not as red. So my brain is still, struggling to accept the fact it means red in Russian, even though I know it does. But, even though I have to admit that since red is my favorite color, somehow beautiful and red goes together for me. So that's a good thing, but it is a very problematic false friend for me. Another one that I find rather funny than problematic is the word život in Serbian, means life. In Czech as well, život means life. But in Russian, život means belly or stomach. I have no idea how. I'm very curious about the story behind these words and their different meaning in those closed languages, in Slavic languages. I would really like to know how did some Slavic people, like half of them, decided to actually name life život, and then Russians decided to use that word for belly or stomach. So this is a very funny one. I never got confused with this one. That's the difference between život and krasny. With krasny, I always get confused. With život, I don't, but every time I have to speak Russian and use that word, it's kind of funny to me. I don't know. Another very funny word, this time it's only Czech and Russian, is hudý. Hudý in Czech means poor. Hudoj in Russian means skinny. Maybe a long time ago, when people didn't have enough food in Europe, that kind of made sense, maybe. But nowadays it's still a very funny word, and I remember how much my Russian classmates back when we were learning Czech struggled with this word. So this is another very funny false friend. And the last one that I'm gonna share today is a false friend between Russian and Serbian, and I always found this one confusing. It's the word strana. In Russian means a country. In Serbian it means side or page of a book. It has two meanings. So still, when I'm speaking Russian and when I'm supposed to say that something is happening in certain country, my brain is just suggesting me not to use the word strana, because for me it means something different, and I have to focus a lot in order to push myself to use strana for a country. So as you can see, these false friends, there are so many of them, like listing all of them would take 10 hours. It would be a very long video. So I'm just listing few of them because I don't know, guys, if you speak these languages, so it might not be interesting to you to listen to all these words in languages you don't speak. But there are so many of them, and I would say that after watching this video, you will probably understand why are these words called false friends. Same as human false friends. False friends in linguistics are pretending to be something else, and then you start trusting them, and then they disappoint you because they are not what you thought they are. So the name false friends actually makes a lot of sense in this case. My advice is that when you are learning a new language, especially if you are learning a language that's very similar to your native one or very similar to one of the languages you speak, you might feel very self-confident when you see how many similarities there are, or you might get very self-confident thinking that you already know so many words. That's what happened to me with Russian, for example. But be careful. Many of those words probably have the same or similar meaning as the ones in your native language, but you can never be sure. And every once in a while you will meet a false friend that you might memorize as something and it actually means something different. And as I said before in the video, I have had embarrassing situations because for some reason my brain cannot give up on what it has learned. So be very careful. Every time you see any word, check in the dictionary, check with the dictionary and learn the true meaning of the word. But I guess that even if you once in a while get embarrassed using a wrong word, I think it's completely fine. You at least have a funny story to tell about your language learning adventures. Guys, I hope you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope you learned something new. Please let me know in the comments what are some false friends that I haven't mentioned in this video. It doesn't matter in what language they are. It doesn't matter if I speak the language or not. I would really like to hear about more false friends. And also let me know if you have ever been in a situation where you said something wrong or got embarrassed because of these false friends. I love listening about other people getting embarrassed. So let me know in the comments what was your experience with false friends. Hope you enjoyed my video and see you next week.